Welcome to Encounter, where we celebrate putting faith into action and community leaders who live out compassion, grace, and love. We're a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that addresses food insecurity through CHOW and the Greater Good Grocery, provides hospital and jail ministry, builds wheelchair ramps, and assists neighbors with transportation and shopping services through Faith in Action volunteers. We invite you to the conversation. Encounter your neighbors as we learn to walk together in love and kindness.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today, Joe Sellepack, the Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches. Retirement is an interesting subject matter for people my age. I'm in that moment in my life where my wife and I are empty nesters. Our kids have gone through college. And my wife and I are starting to look at each other going, how do we get ready for this next stage of life? And it was suggested to me by one of our guests that this be a subject matter that would actually bring up a lot. There is a lot of our viewers and a lot of our listeners who would relate to the situation in life that my wife and I find ourselves in today. So I met Angela Driscoll, our guest today, through the Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. We were at a Connect over lunch, and we were starting to talk about some of the things that she does as a financial advisor. But then we also started talking about some of the other things that kind of go on in life, and found out that she was interested in helping out with Chop and Chat and a whole bunch of other things that we have going on at the council. So. It's good to have you on Encounter today, Angela.
Thanks, Joe. Happy to be here.
And let's talk a little bit about how did you become a financial advisor? Why did you choose that as a career path?
It's actually a second career path for me. Mm-hmm. I was an elementary school teacher for a number of years and loved that. And I was not involved in finance for the better part of that time. Unfortunately, I went through a divorce, and it was at that point that I realized I needed to think about my future. I had 2 young children at the time, so that's really what sparked my interest in finance. I connected with a financial advisor who helped me understand things like my 403B and retirement savings and those kinds of things, life insurance. And that's, again, what really sparked my interest. I started diving into it, learning more, and fast forward 10 years, almost 15 years, and continued to stay involved in that, and just decided that it was time to make that leap. I was approached by my now financial advisor, who is also at Edward Jones, and he said, "And you'd be great at this. You'd be great at this." So I took the leap and have never looked back. It's been fantastic. So
it's interesting. You and I have talked about this too. That a lot of women, especially, leave that part of their relationship to their husband, to their detriment in a lot of ways. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to. You're correct, and I don't think that that's done intentionally. I think that in the past that it was typical for a husband to work, be the breadwinner, take care of all those things. Many of my elderly clients still have that sort of relationship in their marriage, and that's okay. I think that my generation, working moms, you were just working to live, essentially, and nobody ever gets married to get divorced.
Right. Exactly.
It happens. In my particular situation, my husband was the primary breadwinner, so he had a retirement plan, he had stocks, all those kinds of things. So we were in a decent position. I think it's very important, as you say, to make sure that you're having those conversations as a married couple, and that the women are involved with the finances, take part in your retirement plan, again, have those conversations. Yeah.
And you must see situations where, especially as retirement planning has gone on, where the man has been very active in that, but then he dies, or having something like that with the widow then having to take over and all the various aspects of the household.
Yeah.
And that would probably be very difficult to have gone through.
Ironically enough, it's very sad for me to say that this hits very, very close to home. As recently as yesterday, that exact situation. 53-year-old husband passed away very unexpectedly, and the wife they were such a solid unit, and the wife has no idea where to turn, what to do. And again, it wasn't purposefully done. Right. You just don't, those are conversations that we don't think about at 30, 40, 50, even sometimes 60 years old. You think, I've still got lots of time, or yeah, I know I should get to that. She's scared. She's scared because she's not sure where to turn, what to do. So
how would you go about counseling a person in the middle of all of that, or even before that? Like, when we are in our 30s or when we are in our 20s, and we're starting down that road, how important is it for those folks to be talking money?
Well, I think it starts long before marriage. I'm thinking about a young couple who came in. They're actually getting married in June. I have a couple of couples that are getting married in June. They both have just recently out of college, finally got their first job. So the first thing we talked about was, what are you each doing for your retirement plan as far as work goes? Does your employer offer some sort of 401k, 403b, something like that, and are you contributing to it? So first and foremost, let's make sure you're both individually doing that. And then I think it is just incredibly important to start having those conversations prior to marriage or during the early stages of marriage about what each of your views are on finances. For instance, let's say you get a significant raise or bonus. Do you think that bonus should be put into some sort of savings account? Do you think you should go on a big vacation? How do you feel about children and their education? Do you plan on paying for their education, or do you think that that's something that they should be responsible for themselves? Making sure that those, again, conversations are had very early on, and then continuing to revisit those conversations. I think that's another misconception, is you just say, oh, yep, that's what we talked about, and I want this, and you want that, and we agree, and then just leave it. But every time a new sort of life stage happens, it's time to revisit that conversation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, well, the two big stressors in a lot of relationships are sex and money. First and second.
Reasons for divorce.
Well, yeah, and so you end up with these two things, and oftentimes unless it's forced on them, they haven't really had very many discussions on either one of those subjects. But it would seem like both of those ought to be part of any premarital kind of discussion that kind of goes on. Especially when you start factoring in today the amount of debt that people are in from education and from other sources of debt that they bring into the relationship, and then all of a sudden they're thrown into a situation where neither one of them ever anticipated being in that kind of a pressure keg.
Right.
And that's a hard discussion to have with somebody, isn't it?
It is a very hard discussion to have. I oftentimes will tell my young clients, those that again are getting ready to get married, spend just as much time talking about these important things as you do spending time talking about actually planning the wedding.
Yeah.
Because it's exciting, and there's no reason why you shouldn't have all the things that you want, and it should be beautiful and amazing, but devote just as much time to these conversations as you do at planning the wedding.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm a pastor. Oftentimes I'll have to have those conversations with people as we're getting ready to get married. One of the things that I'll tell them is that you want to make sure that the marriage lives up to the hype of the wedding.
Yeah, yes.
And that's part of the struggle, is that oftentimes you have this beautiful, romantic incredibly elaborate wedding, and then you get thrown into a marriage, and the marriage is all the raw things that kind of go on. And
it's tough.
It is a hard thing.
It's tough. I mean, marriage just as a whole is a tough, organization. I mean, it's a tough thing to do. So
it is.
When you add on, like you say, the stress of money on top of that, it just compounds things. So
as as a person goes into midlife, when they're in their 30s, looking at their 40s, and they're starting to really think about putting things down as far as like what their goals are for when they retire. How do you work? What goes on in that? At that time in their life?
So the three main things that I look at, and they're kind of in this order, are A, emergency savings. Do you have some sort of emergency fund? 3 to 6 months, we say, of funds lined up in case you, God forbid, were in an accident and couldn't work, or lost your job because of, shutdowns or anything like that. So get some savings built up, and then look at your retirement plan, employer plan, and sometimes those two things are flipped. So make sure you're contributing to that employer plan, and then get that savings built up. The employer plans are tricky, and I say tricky because I'm finding that many employees are going into a new job and don't fully understand what their employer plan is offering them. So talk to someone in HR, call a financial advisor, somebody that can read the ins and outs of what the employer plan is doing. Is it a 401k that offers a match? If they're matching, if an employer is offering to match a percentage of your contributions, then first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that. That's essentially free money. It's the employer saying, if you put in 2% of your pay, we're going to put in 2% of your pay. It's an incentive to keep employees with that employer. And there are certain tax advantages to employers to be able to do that. So employer plan, contribute to that. If your employer does not offer an employer plan, then what are you doing to contribute to some sort of account to make sure you're saving for that? And those are different conversations that you can have. So employer plan, emergency savings, and then from there, then we talk about, okay, what are some of your immediate goals, short-term goals, 3 to 5 years, and then what are your long-term goals, 5, 10, 15, 20 years? How far are you from retirement? And having conversations around how to best be ready for them. Outside of an employer plan or a traditional IRA, we talk about contributing to a Roth IRA. That is after-tax money, but that money grows tax-free. So the sooner that you can start contributing to something like that, in addition to your employer plan, then you're looking at diversified buckets of money in retirement, and that's really what you want, is to have these different buckets, if you will, of funds that you can pull from when you need to.
Having it be diversified buckets would help when there is market volatility, or when things start to go sideways. So like where I live in the I live up near Apple Hill. Oh yeah. And everything up there, it requires propane, and it also requires septic systems. Yeah. And you never really think about septic especially if you're living, where you normally are. But these things are expensive when they fail, and so you have to kind of have a understanding of how much it costs and how to do the upkeep on it. But then also, eventually it will fail, and you'll end up having to replace things like that, and that's not cheap.
No, so then where are you going to pull those funds from?
Well, yeah, exactly right.
You have that emergency fund, if you will, which is liquid somewhere, high yield savings account, ideally. But that's also money that is reserved for, again, no income coming in.
Right.
You know, so yeah, having these different buckets of money that you can pull from in a managed account of some sort is the best thing to do. Yeah.
My guest today is Angela Driscoll, and we're talking, she's a financial advisor with Edward Jones, and we've been talking about retirement planning. And really a lot of it has been dealing with the fiscal aspects of retirement planning. And yet we also know that there's also a lot else that goes kind of into being retired that is not necessarily just attached to money, right?
Right.
And what are some of those things?
So when we think about our retirement years, I think we've talked a bit about building up to retirement, but when we think about our retirement years, it's really important to think about what lifestyle you want. Do you want to travel a lot? Are you planning on relocating to where your children are, perhaps, or grandchildren? Are you willing to downsize your house? Things like that. So it's really important to think about in the retirement years, A, what do you want that lifestyle to look like? And then from there, you sort of backtrack and do some of that pre-planning. But also, you've got to think about, you're now on a fixed income.
Right.
So any way you look at it, it's a fixed income. Right now, I mean, gas.
Yeah.
$160 to fill my truck up a couple weeks ago. So yeah, those prices go up and your income is still pretty much the same. And prices aren't going to come down, right? So we have to make sure that you're set to be able to accommodate those things. So looking at your lifestyle, looking at that fixed income, and making sure that you, again, have different buckets of money to pull from. Taking advantage of taxes. How do you make sure that your withdrawals are the most tax efficient? And there are all sorts of different ways to make sure that you're doing that. Important to talk to somebody about that. And then the other thing, Joe, really is long-term care. You know, health and at the average cost of assisted living right now is $11,000 a month.
Yeah.
A month. So, and I know that you're familiar with the resources that we have are sort of limited. Not just here, but I think as a whole.
Across the board, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We're living a lot longer, and those resources are much more scarce. So making sure that you're paying attention to those things in retirement as well.
What would be some of the things that you would be talking about as far as long-term care? Or insurance or some kind of some kind of policies that are involved?
That's exactly it. And looking at those long-term care insurance policies well before retirement. Once you get into retirement, then you get into it's difficult to get a solid policy at that point. So that's another thing to be talking to an advisor about, or an insurance specialist about prior to, again, retirement in those early years. Get that long-term care policy, started, and we could talk for days about that. There are so many nuances to insurance and the riders that you can get on them to make sure that you're taken care of, that your loved ones, if you have young children, how are they being taken care of, spouse, those kinds of things.
And a lot of that also has to do with developing a will or making sure that you have those things in place as well.
Yes, one of the misconceptions I'm noticing is that people think that they only need a will or trust if they're wealthy.
Right.
And I say, if you have loved ones, if there's somebody that you love in your life and you own anything, you need a will. And the will just simply identifies who's getting what and how much they're getting. It just makes things so much easier after you pass. Again, talking about my husband and wife that, as recently as yesterday, that's the last thing she wants to be dealing with right now when she's grieving her husband is to try and figure out not only who gets what, but where everything is, how things are supposed to be taken care of. Those things can all be identified in a will. They're fairly inexpensive you know,
Yeah.
so it's something that you can do. I'm bringing to mind briefly a client couple of mine, they're 89 and 90, lovely. They have not revisited their will in years, so much so that we were talking about it a couple weeks ago. They have 4 children. Unfortunately, 2 of their children have passed, and they're still in the will. They're still named in the will.
Right.
You know, so it's important to have one and to revisit that, make sure it's up to date. Yeah.
Yeah, because we are in a probate state, so that would mean that in order for any of the funds to be released to the folks that are benefiting from you, those folks would require to pay it out of pocket until they can potentially get it from the estate itself.
Yeah.
The estate kind of gets seized at that point. It's very important. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
The idea that you have a will, you have a trust, and without those things in place, you're really in the people that are inheriting from your estate are in pretty dire circumstances without that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Having that will established, it shortens that probate period so much. And then a trust, obviously, that eliminates probate. Everything is there is no probate if you have a trust. You don't always have to have a trust. It's, you know, but again, something that you should definitely A, have, and B, be talking to a legal professional about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why people like you are very important. So
well, thank you.
Thank you for your work. So Angela, the other aspect of it is that, you know, you go to work all the time, you know, and you have this structure that's placed around you, and then all of a sudden you hit retirement and you have none of that. You know, it's that for a lot of us, because you spend so much time working, is a hard thing to shift from, right?
Yeah.
So how do you counsel people through that, or do you even have like any thoughts on that?
No, we certainly do. I think a good financial advisor does have that conversation with clients, especially as they're nearing retirement, because it can be, as you say, detrimental, especially for jobs that are really intense. So you're on that hamster wheel, if you will, for so many years, and then you go from that to now, I'll roll out of bed at 9 or 10 or whatever. It's very different. So having those conversations about what is your plan? What are you going to do when you retire? Do you have some hobbies that you're going to pick up? Do you plan on volunteering? The Senior Center, I'll tell you, one of the best things about this position is being able to have flexibility in my daytime schedule so that I can be out in the community doing things. The senior centers are amazing. That Chop and Chat that I've been able to volunteer at, I just love it. I love it. So taking advantage of those things and the resources in the area.
So for those of you that don't know Chop and Chat, it's one of the programs of the Council of Churches. It's one of the things that go on at Faith in Action Volunteers. And Chop and Chat's like, what do you do in Chop and Chat?
So Chop and Chat is exactly that. It is chopping and chatting. The idea around Chop and Chat is to get seniors out and socializing with other seniors. So Sweet Sally gets she researches these recipes and gets all the ingredients together, and then she packages them essentially in a brown paper bag, and we take the bag to the senior centers, and we bring cutting boards and knives and vegetable peelers, and the seniors essentially chop the vegetables that are going to go into the recipe, and then take them back home with the other ingredients. I think a couple weeks ago we did something that was like a tuna noodle, broccoli, bake. So she brought a can of tuna and the can of soup that goes in it, and then they chopped up broccoli and you know, celery and onions and stuff to do it. So it's just great. And then Sally and I kind of distribute the food, and then we just get to walk around and chat with you know, the people that are there. I've met some amazing people. Yeah, it's great.
And especially for a senior, it's important to remember that one of the things that we have, one of the detriments in being a senior is the isolation that kind of goes on. Volunteering helps bridge that gap, because then you don't feel as if you're trapped in your own four walls.
Correct.
Also get you interacting with people, which is an important part. Get you, it has neurological aspects of it too. You're able to relate to people, and that decreases the amount of depression that may go on. There are lots of benefits to both being a volunteer, but also going to those senior centers where all of that stuff is going on. Not just chop and chat, but I mean, these senior centers are pretty packed with volunteer potential, as well as things that are going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, the calendars, if you look on any of the local senior center calendars, they're all packed between the lunches that they offer and the entertainment that they have. I've gone in and done workshops on Social Security and Medicare and things like that. They're chock full of information and socialization, so yeah.
So Angie, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
They can, Angela Driscoll, Edward Jones, edwardjones.com. Well, then they'll do a little search and I'll come up. You can also find me on social media, and of course you can also give my office a call, 607-444-2328. Yeah, any questions I can answer, be happy to.
Well, thank you for being on today.
Thanks,
and
Joe.
if there are any last words that you want to offer people as far as planning for retirement?
Talk to someone. Talk to someone, talk to someone. It does not cost you anything to pick up the phone and say, I think I need, or can you help me with this? And if that office can't help you or isn't willing to help you, in this industry, Joe, we say there's an FA on every street corner. So keep calling until you find somebody that you're comfortable with and that can get you down that path.
Yeah.
So important.
Talking to people, not feeling as if you're trapped, not living with the anxiety that kind of goes around it, making sure you put together a plan, and then making sure you and your spouse are on the same page as far as what your goals are, what you're looking for out of retirement, and making sure that you've I'm trying to summarize our entire conversation right now.
It's a lot, yeah. So essentially, I think you hit on all the things, though. Beginning in marriage, just talk. Money is not, let's not make money an evil. Let's make it work for us. So talk about it in marriage, talk about it through your working years, and then as a retiree, make sure you're getting out into the community and staying active, and use the resources that are there.
Well, Angie, thank you for being on Encounter.
Thank you, Joe.
And for all of you, I hope you would be kind and generous to each other, and have a great Sunday.